Hi. So today I wanted to talk to you about some tips you can begin to incorporate into your practice for better bow tone. So the first one, which you've probably heard about, is having the correct bow hold. Bow hold is one of the most important things you can do to have good tone on the violin, and it's a huge part of your foundation. So if you're a beginner and you haven't learned it yet, the correct bow hold for the violin goes like this. And if we go finger by finger, I can show you in detail. So your thumb is going to go on the bump right here. And that bump can go right flush up against your fingernail. If you take your thumb off, sometimes you'll see a little dent right there from where it's been poking in. So your thumb goes right up against the bump there, and it should have a nice bend in it. You never want to see what I call a banana in your thumb. You want it to be nice and bent. And so it should go right under the bump. Always leave that fingernail just a tiny bit longer. Don't cut it too short because you can irritate the skin if you cut it too short when you're clipping your nails. So it's right there on the bump. And then your first finger will wrap around the grip, and it touches the stick right under that knuckle right there, and wraps around like a nice hook. So we've got our thumb, our first finger, our middle finger, which is just going to rest on the frog and make sure it's all the way down, not up here, but it's all the way down to the bottom edge of the frog. And then the ring finger is just going to go right next to it, covering up that spot that you see on your bow. The little finger is just going to go right on top, just like that. And you have kind of a forward slant to it, so not straight up and down, but more of an angle. You want to make sure that you have your pinky on the wood there, not on this, because you'll be stretching it out too much if you have it on the metal part. So right there in the wood. And with your pinky, same thing as the thumb, a common mistake is to collapse and do what I call French fry. So you want to keep that nice and curved. All your fingers should be nice and curved, and they're bending right there at the knuckles. So you have a nice bow hold with kind of a little slant to it. So you're not quite straight up and down, but you're leaning in to the stick there. And you don't want a big mountaintop. You want a nice flat hand, curved fingers. And one thing that happens a lot is that your fingers will travel up. So you want to make sure they're nice and wrapped the whole time, all the way around the frog there. So that's your good bow hold, and that can take some time to develop. Sometimes it might take a couple months before it starts to feel really comfortable. But if you just keep trying, keep building up the muscles in there, and keep checking back while you're playing and correcting whenever you have the collapsed pinky or the collapsed thumb, you stop and fix it every time. And then eventually your hand will just meld into this nice bow hold, and you won't have to think about it. It'll be an automatic thing. Now that's going to be a huge part of your good tone, is being able to hold the bow correctly. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, that's another really big one, is having a straight bow when you play. So often for beginners, your bow will want to do all sorts of things. It'll want to go like that, it'll want to go like that. But what we're looking for is a bow that is, I'm going to do it cello style for a minute, it's straight with the end of your fingerboard here and the bridge. So not a diagonal like that or like that. So it should be going as straight as you can. We're all human, so we're not robots, but you want to get it straight most of the time. So a big part of that is playing not from your shoulder, which is what beginners tend to want to do. Normally, beginners will start off and then I have a lot of movement right here. Or they'll be like this. So we want to get that elbow into position. We want to scoot our bow so that it's halfway in between the end of the fingerboard and the bridge here. And we want to actually open up from the elbow. So your elbow's like a hinge. Instead of going from your shoulder like this. So when you do it from the shoulder, your bow is just kind of sliding all around all over the place. So just try to get in the habit of opening from the elbow like a hinge. So that is something that can take lots of time, but like I explained in the article, there's a trick where you can go lean up against a wall. So if you have a wall with empty space in your house, you can lean this part up so that this isn't able to move around. And there's the other big one is looking in the mirror when you play. So if you can look in the mirror when you play, that'll be a huge eye opener. You'll be able to see what you're doing wrong, and you'll be able to see what you can do to fix it. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is using your finger on your bow stick to control a bouncy bow. So a lot of times you'll go to play and your bow wants to bounce, and maybe it's patchy sound, like kind of like in and out, too light, too hard. So what you can do if your sound is patchy, you're not pressing in enough, or if your bow is bouncing when you're playing, is that you can use this first finger to control the stick. I want you to take a look at what my first finger is doing. So I'm actually moving the stick. I'm with my knuckle here, I'm leaning into the stick, and I'm able to control my stick. So if my stick starts bouncing, I will quickly use my first finger kind of like a hook and get it under control. I'm bouncing, and then I grab my finger onto the stick, and then I'm able to dig into the string a little more. And produce a nice solid tone. And so if I'm playing kind of patchy, like my sound isn't quite full, what I can do is I can apply my pressure into the stick and get a nice even tone there. So the next thing I want to talk about is playing with small bow strokes. In the beginning, sometimes you let your bow out on a long leash and it just wants to go everywhere. So something you can do to get it under control, and also it's a lot of it's psychological. Like if you hear your violin, it sounds like a disaster. It's gonna make you upset, maybe frustrated. You don't want to play it anymore. You're like, gotta take a break. So if you can just get it under control for a minute and hear sounds that are a lot more pleasing to your ears, that'll help you get through some of the more frustrating practice sessions, which happens, especially when you're a beginner. So if your bow is wild and out of control, go ahead and just take it down a minute to some tiny bow strokes. So maybe instead of using the whole thing, you just use a couple inches worth. So I'm gonna So even if that's not exactly the way your song is meant to be played, this is kind of an exercise to say, hey, my bow is wild and untamed. I'm gonna get it under control. I'm going to just use a tiny bit of it, but I'm going to make pleasing, nice, clean bow strokes, and that's going to help me kind of get through my practice. And then eventually, once you get those under control, you can start expanding a little bigger. And then bigger. So it's something you might apply to your playing over the course of a couple days or a couple weeks, or something you might use as an exercise whenever you do a new song that is really challenging for you. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is keeping your bow hairs flat on the strings. So one thing that I see my beginning students doing a lot is that they want to tip their bow up a little bit like that, which is a good thing to do if you're trying to play really softly, but that's generally not something you do until you're a little more advanced. So if you're doing that as a beginner, if you see your bow kind of tipping off like that or that, try putting all your strings flat on this, or I'm sorry, all of your bow hairs flat on the violin string, and then getting a nice even tone. Because when it tilts up like that, sometimes it gets kind of patchy, kind of your sound is kind of in and out. And what's really great in the beginning is to project, even if you don't feel confident, to project a confident energy with nice, strong bow strokes, and that'll help you out along the way in developing your confidence. And it'll make other people have the idea that you're more confident. So that'll help everyone out. So if you can just place all your hairs on the bow, make sure it's not tilting up that way or that way, you'll have a lot better sound. So those are my 5 big tips for improving your bow tone. And like I said in the article, these aren't quick fixes, but they're definitely things to incorporate in your practice long term. And over time, you should start seeing some major improvements. All right, well, I hope you guys take a lot from this video, and I hope you start seeing improvements right away.